And you're live.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Steve Dodd of the McDowell Sonoran Preserve Commission, and this is the regular November 5th meeting of the Preserve Commission. Again, I'm Steve Dodd. I'm chairperson. I'm calling the meeting to order. Our first order of business is a roll call of the commissioners. Vice Chair Cynthia Winstrom. Cynthia, are you here? Okay, we'll come back. She has been here. Commissioner Hackbarth.
Yeah, Commissioner Hackbarth is here.
Right, Commissioner LaPat Pelasco.
Commissioner LaPat Pelasco here.
Commissioner Lips.
Marcia Lips is here.
Commissioner McKeegan.
Commissioner McKeegan is here.
Commissioner Parker.
Parker is here.
And Commissioner Winstrom.
We don't hear you, Cynthia.
Okay, we will follow.
We'll follow up. She's showing on screen, but we may have a technical issue, so we'll check that.
We'll work on that. Okay. We will begin with public comments. As those of you who have been following the electronic process, we do that a bit differently. We have comments submitted to be read, and we also have provisions for spoken comments as well. We have no spoken comments this evening. We do have one written comment that we'll read with the agenda item that is pertinent to later in the meeting. So therefore, we'll move on to our agenda item number 4, approval of minutes. We will start with commissioners. Any comments or questions on minutes from our last meeting, October 15th? Any questions or comments on the meeting minutes from that meeting? If not, can we get a motion to approve the minutes? Commissioner Lips.
Commissioner Hackbarth makes a motion to approve.
Commissioner Pelasco seconds.
Who's that?
Pelasco.
Commissioner Pelasco, thank you. We have a first and second. We will do a roll call vote. Chairperson Dodd votes yes. Vice Chair Winstrom. Okay, Commissioner Hackbarth.
I vote yes.
Commissioner LaPat Pelasco.
LaPat Pelasco votes yes.
Commissioner Lips.
Lips votes yes.
Commissioner McKeegan.
Commissioner McKeegan votes yes.
And Commissioner Parker.
Parker votes yes.
Right, thank you. Our minutes are approved. We will move from there to the McDowell Sonoran Conservancy update. And I believe we have Justin Owens, the Executive Director of the Conservancy. Justin?
If I could just quickly interrupt, I've just gotten from Cynthia Winstrom that she is hearing us and she is voting yes on the.
Okay, great.
Cynthia, if you're not able to, if you can hear us, but you're not able to speak, we'll see if we can get that corrected. Your screen is showing that you are not muted from our side, so it may be in your computer. So with that,
okay,
we'll go ahead with Justin.
Okay, Justin, are you there?
I am, Mr. Dodd.
Okay, you're up. Please go ahead.
Wonderful, Mr. Commissioner and members of the Preserve Commission. As was stated, my name is Justin Owen. I'm the CEO of the McDowell Sonoran Conservancy, and I wanted to give you an update on what we are working on. So as we've reported at the last few commission meetings, we are still continuing to work with preserve staff on our plans to pilot restarting our public-facing programs. However, due to the recent increase in infection rates, we are continuing to defer those plans for now. We have worked together to create logistics and additional safety measures to put in place, and these will be revisited once we see our rates trend back downwards and it looks like it's safe to get back out there. I can assure you that our stewards remain very excited and enthusiastic to restart our public-facing activities, and we will do so once it is agreed that it is safe. For part of your agenda this morning, you're going to hear from our Field Institute manager, Tiffany, and she's going to be talking to you about our long-term monitoring project. So I don't want to steal any of her thunder from the bulk of it, but I am happy to share a couple of highlights. Our scientific paper on transplanting and seeding our restoration sites in the Sonoran Desert was published 2 weeks ago in a national journal, so that's very exciting. The paper was focused on the work that we've done in and around the preserve and what we've learned over the last 5 to 6 years at these sites. It is a very exciting accomplishment for us, and a huge thank you to the stewards and staff and everyone who helped contribute to that scientific paper. As well, Ancala is the first HOA that has proactively reached out to us to help them with their invasive non-native plant issues. We have helped a number of HOAs in the past through us going out to them, but it's exciting that Ancala was the first one to proactively reach out to us. So we really hope the messages are getting out there widely about the importance of eradicating invasive non-native plants and replacing them with native plants. As myself and our team talks to city staff about a lot, we can do a great job eradicating everything in the preserve, but if our surrounding areas don't as well, one monsoon or one dust storm, and then it's all revegetated. An update on our education. Our key focuses still continue to be creating our online expedition days. One of the things that's very exciting is we're in the process of developing an online game, which those of you that are familiar with some of the interactive connectivity games that the third graders do out there, this will give an opportunity for them to be able to have that same interactive process, but in a virtual environment. Also, our 15-minute mini modules that we're calling Desert Discoveries are almost ready, and those will help teachers and students understand the key topics and create a series for them to engage with throughout the year. So not only when they come out and participate in expedition days, but they'll be able to have these mini modules throughout the year to keep the students engaged. As well, our Conservancy Kids Online program, which was very successful over the summer for our online education, we've decided that since we're building out curriculum-based activities for expedition days throughout the year, that we're going to keep Conservancy Kids online, but it will transition to an activity when school is out. So we will go ahead and get that repository set up so that the curriculum the teachers are using stays current, but then when school is out of session, we'll still have Conservancy Kids online. As we move into stewardship, as you all have noticed, maybe not today, but with the weather starting to cool down, we are seeing a lot more visitors from out of town. And our patrollers continue to spend a considerable amount of time in the preserve monitoring the conditions of the trails and also helping our out of town visitors. And I'm proud to report even our new local visitors, people that hadn't experienced the preserve before, but have discovered its majesty here locally and have decided to come out and enjoy it more. Our construction and maintenance projects continue to be working, taking into account social distancing, and we continue to partner with the city on that. I'm sure Scott or Coy will have an update on some of those exciting things later on in the agenda. As part of our no public facing activities, we are still holding off on our new steward classes. They are going to be deferred at least through December. And I can assure you, once it is safe, we will roll that out. And we'll be excited to share a new look for that program, which will be a lot more intensive for people reading up on the beginning and then doing a lot of question and answering on the day of. As well, we are in the process of creating a series of videos that we'll be sharing online to help potential stewards understand what it is to be a steward and what we ask of our stewards. We feel this will be very helpful for people to watch and learn more about what we do before they apply to become before they apply to become a steward. And when we are able to do so, we're planning on scheduling regular, possibly monthly mini orientations in this way that people can come and just find out more information before they do the deep dive into our intense steward program. As well, we held our first virtual all steward event late last month, and it was very well received. Those of you that remember, we usually do our steward education events in person, and we can say we had full capacity. So it was super exciting, and everyone was able to participate virtually, and it was a success. Lastly, I just want to remind everyone, we are celebrating our 30th anniversary in January 2020. So we are moving well ahead on that and planning for it. As well, the Arizona Republic came out and interviewed our team 2 weeks ago for an article about our soil crust research. So very exciting that we're hitting the Arizona Republic. Additionally, the ASU State Press also interviewed us about our partnership with the capstone students. So we haven't told the commission that much about it, but we had a group of ASU capstone graduate students this year that are working on automating our bat emergent counts at the mines within the preserve. So our citizen scientists study the bat populations within the mines, and ASU is building out some artificial intelligence to automate that for our stewards. So it's going to be very exciting. Last week, I was very happy to meet with a gentleman that is partnering with the city's tourism department and Experience Scottsdale. Karen Truchard referred him over to us. And we did about an hour hike in the preserve on what creates the most unique experience for a visitor to Scottsdale and why the preserve is definitely so incredibly unique that it needs to be highlighted nationally in what we're doing. And then last but not least, we are in discussions with Intel. They want to work with us on our invasive plant species projects, and they are petitioning to their senior management for funding for a project that could potentially, again, potentially, because it's artificial intelligence, it's all still in the forefront. They believe that they can build in an algorithm that can read the heat signatures and color signatures of different plants so that we could possibly map the invasive species within the preserve by drone, purely by artificial intelligence, reading the plant's signature. So it's super exciting. And if that is a success, we all know the applications for that could go far beyond our local reach. So with that, I'd open it up to any questions from the commission.
Thank you, Justin. Commissioners, anyone with any questions or comments?
This is Commissioner McKeegan. I have a comment and a question. Justin, first of all, obviously, thank you for sharing the information. Particularly interested to hear about the Oncala reaching out to the Conservancy. Nice to see another a new community getting involved and taking advantage of this, which I think is really worthwhile for them. So I'm really excited to hear about that, and I'm glad you guys are doing that. I have a quick question for you, which is I am in 100% agreement in how you've been handling the lack of gatherings and the lack of public-facing events in light of the pandemic. I'm totally supportive of where you're at on that right now. I'm just wondering if you've gotten any sort of negative feedback, though, from either the public or from stewards. I would hope not, but I'm just curious.
No, that is a great question, and I can say we haven't gotten particularly negative. We've gotten a lot of congratulatory comments from the public that see the blue shirted stewards out there doing patrol and doing a lot of the activities. So we've gotten more praise and accolades for continuing to do the work that we can do remotely than by far any criticism we've received. And the only thing I can speak to from the stewards is by no means is it criticism, but they're so eager. We all know how passionate they are about wanting to get out there, that we do get constant communication from them on when are we going to restart, because they're so excited. So I want to reassure the commission, we are working, Croy and Scott and Jackie and I probably talk every week now, and we're working through what we can from the Conservancy's risk management and mitigation side, as well as Croy and Scott have been working very closely with the city's risk management department to see when we can get those going as soon as possible.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other commissioners with questions or comments?
This is Commissioner LaPat Palasco. I just want Justin to know, so I live in Uncala and they take it extremely seriously on the Firewise, and they've sent us all out, you know, specific information on how to address it and deal with it and make sure we're complying. So I think everybody in this community is taking it very seriously, which is going to be a huge benefit to the preserve. So thanks for helping us.
That's amazing. I love hearing it. Anyone else in HOAs that is listening to the sound of my voice, feel free to send us an email.
Okay, any further questions or comments? If not,
You want to check?
yeah, Commissioner Winstrom, can you hear us?
Okay. Oh, she's still working on it. She is hearing us. She is on board, but she's still working on getting her
Okay,
sound
All
to
right.
work back to us.
we'll be patient. Okay, so we will move on to our next item. Item 6, the Audit Committee Sunset Review Recommendation. Croydon, I think you're handling that.
I
And we
am.
also have citizen comment,
Not on
not
this,
on
on the next one,
the next.
item 7.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay, so this is Croyd, Preserve Director for the City of Scottsdale. And this audit committee is every 3 years, the council audit subcommittee reviews the sunset opportunities for commissions throughout the entire city. And this year was the Preserve Commission was up on the review cycle, and they did go through that, and we included in your packets that the audit committee chair, Kathy Littlefield, that the committee's recommendation to the council is to continue with the Preserve Commission. And there had been a question almost 2 years ago by a study session of the council about size of the commission, and that was raised, but the subcommittee's recommendation is to stay with the 7 member size of the commission. And so that is what was provided an update. That recommendation to the council is on their consent agenda for November 23rd. No need for attendance or anything. We just want to make sure you are all aware of that tri-annual process that goes on. That's all I have.
Okay. Up next, any commissioner questions or comments on that? If not, we'll move to item 7, preserve policy reviews for the next 25 years of preserve management.
Excellent. Thank you. Again, this is Croy Ekblaw with city staff. I'm going to just check Cynthia, if you want to give a shot at if we can hear you.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, with that, then we will begin on the preserve policy reviews. This is the standard slides we've been using to remind everybody of this process, that it's a strategic overview of a variety of policies, and we're using the preserve ordinance, its purpose and management objectives to guide that we assure that we achieve long-term sustainability of the preserve for the next 25 years. And this is the listing of the various policy items that we're reviewing. And tonight, items 1, 3, and 6 are on the agenda. And we're going to begin with the item that is the land acquisition priorities. And Commissioner McKeegan will help out. And just a reminder on this one, we're looking to assess and update the study boundary and address likely cost implications of any land acquisition funding that might be needed. We do have a public comment on this that I'll start with, and it was received from Howard Myers, former commissioner. and chair of the commission, and I will begin with his comment that he submitted to the commission on this item. It is certainly time to start looking at land acquisition again. The remaining funds are supposed to be used for land acquisition, so we owe it to the citizens to do that. Acquisition starts with determining if the public wants to complete the preserve, and if so, how to fund it. There was a plan put together by previous commissions to do that, to do exactly that, but the council has been sitting on it. With a potentially new council, it is time to resubmit that plan and try to get to the act on it. Beyond that, lands to acquire should be prioritized, and in my mind, the land east of Pima Road, north of the Dixon alignment, should be a high priority. This land was included in the preserve boundary because it is essentially the viewpoint into the preserve for anyone in a car, which would include many of our tourists. All land is important, but this segment also supports our tourism industry. It also contains some significant washes which should be preserved. So please consider establishing priorities and putting this land relatively high. The third important aspect is to work with the state land department because they have to put land up for auction before the city can buy it. So a plan to work with them needs to be established. Thanks for bringing this up and getting the process started again. That completes the comment. So moving on to our presentation for tonight. This first slide really just is a summary of some of that past action and a reminder that where we stand with the acreage at now over 30,500 acres, because the land at the bottom 2016 is not included in the dark green calc there. But we have the participation noted on here for acquiring the trust lands and the matching grants that from state parks. So that just is a little bit of the summary of what occurred in the past. These next slides start to get to the some of the history, and this is a little bit of what was referred to in Howard Meyer's comments. The one on your right with the map 6 at the top is a graphic that really comes from back in 2008, 2009. And it was kind of updated by the commission in around 2013 with those the various numbers and circles, and it prioritized the land that was Pima Dynamite, and then it showed the next priorities really jumped up to the area that Howard mentioned in his area 4 is that area north of Dixoletta, east of Pima Road. And then area 5 wraps Legend Trail, and then area 6, what's long been known as the postage stamps. And those numbers represented the priorities. The graphic on the right side that has the strategic acquisition map was kind of the refinement of the commission in 2014, in which the red hashed areas, parcel 1 and 1A, are what we ended up acquiring in 2016. And required a zoning case to get us to that point. And then the 2A, 2B were kind of the next priorities after that. And the commission chose not to go much further than that, partly because there was not a whole lot of remaining funding left. And they really wanted to just stay focused on what those next priorities might be. So that's some of that past history. The next pair of slides, the one on the left, map number 5 and listed as 2010, just again, part of this history that we like to help make sure everyone watching and participating has an understanding of. You'll notice there's the red in the center, and that was the 2009 400 acre acquisition of state land. That was our first state land acquisition in the fall of 2009. The numbers then up above, 1, 1A, 2, 2A, 2B, 3, and 3A and 3B, you'll notice that we didn't go further. We didn't have the tan acreage or the blue acreage, or even the acreage down in the center of the McDowell Mountains listed with numbers. And quite honestly, that was because we weren't sure we had funding to make it through those numbers that are on the screen. We still hadn't received the appraisal for parcel 1 and 1A from the state land at that time. And so even at that time, we weren't sure if we had funding capability to get that far. And of course, this was after the Great Recession and numbers were down and we weren't sure how far we could go. The purpose of comparing that to the graphic on the right then is that by 2016, we acquired everything in green. So we were able to achieve it, partly because the appraisals and that process that we've outlined before with the state land was very successful. And we were able to get there. But I just wanted to pass along to everyone that we go through cycles on this as a group as to what do we have funding for and what are our priorities and you know, where did we want to get to. So just again, just a little bit of history on that. And Jace, I don't know if you wanted to tag anything in up to this point, or we'll move on to some of the historical assessment before we get into upcoming assessment.
I'll just tag in briefly as we're looking at the slide on the left. And Croy, I think we had talked about this at one point, but I think at the time back in 2010 when this was being reviewed, you know, some of those lands that are more highly prioritized there were, I think the concern was even back at that time with some depressed values and with basically raw land conservation, there was a concern that value might be 50 to 100,000 an acre. You know, Howard's email comment, which I appreciate, always appreciate Howard's input on these items, mentions having a plan with the state land department. And I think we're on the road as a commission to having that plan. That's part of what we're trying to do here. And that's obviously why we brought them in a while back. And that's where we're trying to get information from them as best we can, where they put out some loose estimates of 300,000 an acre. I think when we, you know, on the one hand, you kind of take, we as a commission probably take that at face value to some extent. That's the state land department's best guess. That's what they're going to be working off of. That has some inherent use to us. The question for us then becomes, how do we validate that? And I personally think that some of those projections in this map help to validate that, because even those numbers came in drastically low, there were a lot of factors that led to that, such as the economy at the time and the condition of the land. Now we've got land that's been subject to the zoning case that has specific zoning, that has easier access to Pima Road, easier access to water. I think some of the work that was done in the past here helps us or leads us to the conclusion that, you know, the state land department's estimates are probably going to be realistic as far as they're concerned as they view this.
Great. And I would just clarify that those numbered areas on that map number 5, those were all areas that were designated as suitable for conservation. Anything on that map 5 that shows as light blue or were in the numbered areas were suitable for conservation. The dark blue was the area that was designated not for conservation. And that's the area that, as we work through this, that's the area that's got the zoning, and that will lead to a much higher valuation. We were also able to do things, as you alluded to, Commissioner McKeegan, about the proximities to roadways and developability of land and how much infrastructure. Those all factored into the valuations on all the properties. With that, we'll jump forward this next pair of slides. You've probably seen this before. These were graphics that, again, were developed in the 2008 period. And they were the work of the commission collectively and staff that put together on the left side. Map 2 is taking intrinsic strategic value, and the ones were the highest value working to the 2, 3, and 4. Ones were connectivity of existing city-owned land and connectivity to the Tonto National Forest and the McDowell Mountain Regional Park. 4, on the lower end were the lands that were surrounded by development, surrounded by roads, and then variations in between. Map 4 identified relative land values. And again, that's based on 2008 that graphic was done, and 1 being the highest. So the lands surrounded by infrastructure, the roads, the water, sewer lines of the areas of 1 and 2 in particular, along Pima Road, Scottsdale Road, etc., were deemed the highest relative land values. And then the lands furthest away from improvements, most surrounded by mountains or other things, had the lowest numbers of 4, 5, and 6. And so those were the efforts that were done that led to the strategy and the acquisition approach over the last 12 years. So the idea then, the next slide starts to ask the question of what are the examples of assessment criteria that we want to use going forward? And we talked before about looking at this area in particular. Howard's email and others have brought up this area north of Dixoletta and taking a strong look at that. And so what are some of those examples? And we just talked about the intrinsic value and relative land values. The next couple slides, this one starts to show you the slopes, the topography of the land. Now this is focused in on, Scott's going to hit the pointer here. That where he's got the pointer is Pima Road, and goes up to the area where he's at right now is up Legend Trail at the north end. And then all those yellow lines that he's pointing out, those are the zoning boundary lines from the state land case. And the area that he's in right now is actually an area to be set aside for conservation open space required of the zoning. Those are the washes. Those are the steeper slopes. They have some boulder outcrops in them. The areas that are then in that wash as well. Then the areas as we move over into the larger parcels, or the developable parcels, that's where there's single family zoning for the most part. And the slopes aren't quite as great. And that has a higher level of developability. The parcel that Scott's in now is the one that's been noted. It's a 38-acre parcel that's zoned for resort. And I know there's been interest in that. So this is a way that we can evaluate land. The next slide has the same overlay of the zoning boundaries, but it now is showing the aerial and highlighting the washes. And within the washes, we tend to get into the habitat interest areas. And so these are the ways that we can utilize, and we have a lot more, but we didn't want to bore you to tears tonight. We'll bring that back in February with more detail. But these are the things that we'll be using to start evaluating these. Our next slide then also brings back the question of the assessment criteria. And this one includes the zoning map itself and the designation of those boundaries. And that really gets into the land value is going to come strongly in that. And as Commissioner McKeegan mentioned, this is an area where we heard from the state that they have sold similarly zoned residential lands in Phoenix for, I think they said $315,000 an acre. And these are lands in North Scottsdale where these are really the only sizable undeveloped lands in this area. And there will be it's believed that there will be a lot of development interest in paying for those lands. So there will be an auction process and competition. So that will factor into the relative land value. And so our question, and I'll let Commissioner McKeegan pick this up, is these are some of the ideas we've used in the past and things we've been talking about, but what interest that do you all have that you would like us in the next 3 months before we come back in the February time period to research and explore? And there's a question about a site walk. So with that, Commissioner McKeegan, I'll let you pick up a little bit here.
Can we go back to the slide with the relative land values?
Yeah. Can you hear us, Jace?
Yeah, I can. It's further back.
Oh,
Was it the
Then-
number 5?
number 4 is the relative land value, or were you thinking a different one?
This one right there, you got it.
Right side, okay.
So I think this is a useful jumping off point for sort of where we're going here. You know, I think it probably goes without saying for all of us on the commission that if we could acquire all the land within the recommended study boundary for an appropriate price, we would do it. You know, as Howard's comment said, the area north of the Dix-Lita alignment definitely has, you know, inherent value. It would be a valuable addition to the preserve. At the same time, when we go back and look at these maps, you can see that on the left side that the intrinsic value for those lands compared to ones we've already acquired was relatively low, and that the actual land value itself compared to those lands was relatively high, which led you to those priorities. And so obviously a lot of work was done by prior staff, prior commissions to come up with this, but it's always an appropriate time to revisit and reassess. Corey, as you noted, things are unpredictable. We don't really know where prices are going to be a year from now or 5 years from now. But as we look at this particular slide, you just see a generic assessment of an area. And what's left for us to do is to go into this area in more detail and figure out what we can do. And I think there is value in the commission coming up with recommendations and reaching out to the public for recommendations in terms of how we value, much like these two maps do, the intrinsic value of what is there and the, for lack of a better word, likely retail or appraised value of what land is in there on a more granular basis. Because as a practical matter, the money is an issue. We've had the Treasurer's Department in on a number of occasions to give us some vague numbers, and you know, given what's likely to be left in the current funds, it's entirely possible we could be looking at having an ability financially to acquire only a couple of 100 acres, if that. If these things break the way the state land department thinks they're going to. So I think we need to come up with some criteria that we want, that we're going to be able to provide to the council and to the public, frankly, that that measures how we go about handling this. How do we view this? How do we make a cost benefit analysis? And I think the members of this commission are particularly well suited to come up with some ideas and suggestions for what they want to see to help them make that decision.
So one thing I just want to remind, what we chatted about a couple of weeks ago was that we will be pulling together here in November a working team to assist staff, and our intent is to have a couple of commissioners on board with that, and Jace is one of those, and then to also include others that have, you know, and we did this previously. We had others who had real estate interests and other background and interest in the preserve, and that over the next 3 months, then we would develop some options for the land acquisition. And so that in February, March, we'd be back in front of the commission with those results and have some back and forth, some variations. You guys can put some challenges back to the work that the group puts up, and have us work with them to do some additional research, with the goal being to get yourselves to some preliminary concept recommendations in the April-May timeframe, so that study session we've talked about with the council, which would, I can't give you a date now, but would be in the May-June timeframe, would be an ability to present to them and use that as an opportunity to get their feedback and direction for the next year, so that if we are going to go to an election in the fall of 22, we'd need to have the council providing that hard direction by the spring of 22. So just setting up for that. So let's back that slide up again. And I think then the question is,
Croy, can we go back one more?
Yep.
To which one, Jace?
Yeah, this one right here. And as we do that, so Croy, Scott, and I went out and walked a portion of that northeast corner, and where Scott's showing the arrow. And I can tell you from my personal perspective, it was amazingly helpful to actually look at the land we're talking about. That island you kind of see in the middle between the natural open space really has some stunning views, some stunning features to it. At the same time, if you tried to acquire all of the land in that northeast portion, at this point, we just don't have the money. So I think it would be helpful for everyone to get out and get a look at this, either by taking a hike along Axle Grease on our own, and kind of getting a view of the lay of the land, for lack of a better word, or like you said, Croy, perhaps we look at a site visit, because I think that's particularly useful for how to go about this. And then I think as we do that as a commission and consider land value and land acquisition, we can also consider whether it's appropriate to suggest that a funding mechanism be considered for additional land acquisition. I don't think anything is off the table at this point. So I encourage commissioners to be creative.
So really then this question has that. So we're open for ideas and input on this. And as we pull that working group together, we will consider a site walk. And if members of the commission, either all or individuals, you're certainly welcome to go out on your own. We do want to be a little thoughtful about walking into the state trust lands. And so if you want to do that, contact Scott and I, and we can get you a map and describe that and address that in an appropriate fashion. If you'd like, we've done a couple tours with small groups, and we can appropriately space ourselves in the great outdoors and address that. And we would be happy to help coordinate that. Now, if we're going to have a majority of the commission, then we've got a little process issue that we can deal with that deals with noticing a quorum of the commission. So if there's interest in that, we would manage that issue as well. But with that, we were really looking now just to get any additional feedback that you all might have for direction as we get ready to do a little bit of homework over the next 2 to 3 months. So, Mr. Chair, we'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
Hi, Steve, this is Cynthia. I've got a question.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The map that you have up right now, I think I can point it out to you relatively well. Look at the small map, and there's like a corridor right along Kima Road. I'm assuming that's perhaps an easement?
Actually, that's large lot zoning. Those are 1.5 acre lot parcels. So they're a buffer. They were intended originally, they go back to the general plan work of 2002.
Okay.
That wanted to have large lots so that there wasn't high density along that east side of Pima Road.
Okay. So is that acreage that is not for consideration for sale, or is it available for sale?
Oh, all of it will be available for sale.
Okay, no, okay, got it. I know it's expensive. I understand it's expensive. And so that kind of keys off to my second question, which was my assumption, but never assume, is that we can buy a portion, or must we buy the whole portion as it is currently laid out or segmented out by the state land department?
That will evolve. The basic concept they've had is to, in years past, they sold some pretty large acreages. I don't think they're going to sell in really large acreages. I think they're going to keep it in smaller pieces. I mean, our purchases of the preserve ranged from, most of them were in the 1,000 to, we went up to 3,000 acres. There were a couple that were smaller, either earlier at the very end, but most of them were quite large. They're not going to sell on a large basis. That they're going to be looking for more of a retail value than a wholesale value, so to speak.
Okay.
And I think that's what we'll end up seeing as we go forward with that.
Okay. And so I will also just say that from my perspective, yes, I would like to do a site tour. I think that would be invaluable for the commission in general, but for sure I would like to be part of that.
Great.
Marcia.
Commissioner Lips, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Am I correct that that area, the R17, has that already been sold for to build homes on?
None of the land in that map has been sold except for two things, and that's what's highlighted. Scott's showing that parcel along the Rawhide Wash. We acquired that, and we acquired the northeast corner of Pima and Dynamite that Scott's highlighting with the cursor. Those were acquired by the city in 2016. Everything else, about 3,600 acres, is retained in the state trust land holdings. And I do expect them in the future to bring some of those parcels for sale. We do not have any schedule or any array yet. And there's been varying levels of interest. And I'm sure we'll hear more in the upcoming weeks and months ahead, and that'll be part of our review process.
Okay, because I had been told a couple of years ago from people who lived at Cinco Dados that that area east of them was all going to be built up. So.
And that would be correct if it is not acquired by the city. It will be likely acquired by a developer, and it would be developed. That's what we made very clear to people in the zoning case. And the land was already zoned, but it was just that process that led to this specific zoning. That when we were doing that in 2014, 15, and 16, we were very clear with people that land could well be developed.
Okay. And also add me to the list to take a little hike around there. Thank you.
Can you read? I didn't pick that up.
She wants to go on the tour.
Oh, interesting. Sorry.
I just want to get out of the house. It's okay.
You'll have time to plan that. We're not leaving this evening. Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, we will move on from there. I'm going to do cultural plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I will cover the high points along the next couple of slides. And then Commissioner Hackbarth and I have had some conversations about some of these items. So Mark, feel free to color commentate and hit anything that I miss as I move through this. We have updated the commission several times in the past about the Cultural Resource Master Plan. It was created in the 2015-16 range, and then it was approved by the council in 2016. Bringing you back to this slide that you've seen a lot of lately. It is number 6 on our list of policies to review for the next 25 years. Not only to talk about what some of the goals and objectives are, but what you'll see in the next couple of slides, and this is what Mark and I have spent some time on recently, is starting to identify some potential costs that might be associated with some of the priorities that are identified in the plan. There'll be some things on the list that are goals of the plan, but they don't really have a direct cost. Things like coordinate with the local Native American tribes on new projects and planning ideas. Things that we want to always be doing, but they don't necessarily have a cost. But there's some things on here that are more project related, some kind of one-time specific projects, and then some other things that are ongoing. So You have seen this list before. What I've done is added the 2 columns to the right and then highlighted with that lighter background and the darker writing some of the items that we'll hit tonight that have potential costs associated with them. This first one is we've surveyed lots of area out there. About 75% of the total preserve area has been surveyed. A lot of that through the state land acquisitions that Croy and Jace were just speaking about. But that leaves about 25% or 7,600 acres that have never had a cultural survey completed on them. So something we would like to do. It's not urgent. We don't need to do it tomorrow. We don't need to do it all at once. So we have an estimate of $10,000 per year that we could stretch out over whatever period of time it takes. We could defray costs by using volunteer labor, such as the Pathfinder group from the Conservancy. We could develop a research model, a research design, and train the volunteers. Because the way these surveys are done is you basically get out there on the land, almost shoulder to shoulder, maybe spaced out a little bit more, at least 6 feet, right? And you walk and you look for things. And then when you find them, you identify them. So that's one of the major items on our list. Moving on, the next one is the idea of potentially completing a cultural landscape inventory. This is a little different than a survey that I just spoke of. A cultural landscape inventory, or a CLI, is rather than focusing on everything that's in a particular area, you focus on a theme or a topic, such as the rock art of the preserve or mining history of the preserve. And if depending on which topics we decided to move forward with, we could expect a cost of about $15,000 per topic to complete those cultural landscape inventories. The next item, and you'll see this theme throughout a lot of the things that we do with the preserve, is providing educational opportunities to the public. One item we'll mention here in a minute is the Browns Ranch Interpretive Trail that we're going to be working on, but other sites that are already known and have access, Bounced Rock, Cathedral Rock, the amphitheater. How can we stabilize those sites and prepare them in a way that could be visited for educational purposes? And not only could there be potentially a capital cost of whether it's installing signage or doing some kind of stabilization or access control, but also programmatically developing synergy with our libraries, with the local schools, with Experience Scottsdale, really tapping into the tourism industry, the Conservancy, of course, and anyone else who would be willing and wanting to do public outreach. That next item is stabilization of existing sites that we have in the preserve. One great example is the ball court. We do have one site that has a unique feature of a ball court that it's very close to the edge of a wash, and as erosional forces continue to act over the coming years and decades, we may need to do some stabilization to it to prevent the wash from chewing away at it. So we estimate for various types of stabilization projects, potentially $2,000 to $3,000 per year. That next item wasn't specifically identified in the cultural plan, but it's one that has come up through a lot of the work that the city and the Conservancy do hand in hand. A lot of these areas, of course, especially in the north area, were ranched for many, many years. So there are barbed wire fences, some of them around our perimeters, some of them cutting through what's now the middle of the preserve. They're obviously not used anymore for cattle grazing, so they're not really doing anything for us, but they're old. So before we can remove any of them, we want to go through the proper channels to document them and develop a treatment plan. Working with the Pathfinders from the Conservancy, we will have to use the services of a professional archaeologist. So we're estimating about $20,000 to do that work. This next slide, you'll notice that the heading at the top for Browns Ranch, these were the specific recommendations out of the cultural plan related just to the Browns Ranch site. The first one that's highlighted there is the development of an interpretive trail within the site. What we need to do there is develop a multidisciplinary team. We need people that that design trails, build trails. We need archaeologists, historians. We would have the Conservancy staff and stewards heavily involved with that project. And just based on our recent costs from the Fracefield Interpretive Trail, we put $200,000 on that project item. And then the next one kind of relates to that, which would be, as we're working on the design and layout and construction of that trail, might there be any stabilization or any protection we would need to do for the infrastructure around the Browns Ranch site? We would want to make sure we include those elements in those costs. So that is the list. Again, you've had a copy of this list in the past, the columns that are on the left, but now we're building it out with kind of some of those action items to get these items moving forward and potential costs. So we will continue. You'll probably see this again in the future as we continue to build out, especially when we talk about the potential future funding options for the preserve, what type of dollar amount we might want to plug in for the years to come. So that's kind of the highlights, Mark. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to any of those items or overall.
Oh, I think you covered it very well.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions?
I have a question. This is Cynthia.
Go ahead.
Can you go back to the previous slide, please, Scott?
Certainly.
And I'm sorry, I probably heard this and just didn't capture it. So let's see, number 2 of the yellow box is targeted educational venues for the public to encounter archaeological sites. Tell me what that means, targeted educational venues.
Mark, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. What I'm thinking about in that kind of a situation is it doesn't have to be in the preserve. You can go outside and approach schools. You can approach tour companies, Chamber of Commerce, whatever it is, and say, how do you think we can get our message across to people that you come in contact with? In the schools, is there a program that introduces history or plants or anything else that might be of interest that overlaps with what we have in the preserve, that we could produce some kind of a curricula for them and have it brought to them that they can appreciate what's in their neighborhood? That's
perfect. That's outstanding. Thank you, Mark, for that clarification.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I see no hands, so we will move forward to item 7, long-term monitoring. And Scott, that's you and Tiffany.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I will do a very brief introduction, then I'll turn it over to Tiffany for her presentation. So similar to what we were just talking about with the cultural plan, we also have the ERP, the Ecological Resource Plan for the preserve, which really focuses on setting a baseline state at the time that that plan was created, of what conditions the preserve was in at that point. And then over time, the thumbnail goal here is to monitor changes in the preserve, whether it's the plants, the animals. Tiffany will dig deeper into that. And we're looking for changes. Are things staying the same? Are they changing in any particular direction? And then the next steps after that would be potentially, why are those changes happening? So again, this is another installment of the, again, your favorite slide, number 3 in the wildlife habitat and corridor protection. So with that, I will turn it over to Tiffany, who is going to share her screen and give you that presentation.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen when you, there we go.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, can folks see that?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Scott. That was actually perfect. You covered everything I want to cover, so I'm good, right? Totally kidding. Chairman Dodd, commissioners, I am absolutely delighted to be back with you this evening, especially because tonight I get to discuss with you some of the work that I am most passionate about. So in the last two presentations that I delivered, I discussed some of the ways in which our work is helping to protect and restore ecosystem functioning. But tonight I'm going to give a very deep dive into why that is so critically important. And so to put it very simply, ecosystems matter. Ecosystems are what allow life to thrive on this planet, including our own species. So everything from our oceans to the polar ice caps, from tropical rainforests to, of course, our beloved desert. All of these are the reasons why species are here on this earth, and we are part of those ecosystems. But these ecosystems are not operating independently from each other. Instead, they are all deeply entwined with each other, such that what's happening in the oceans affects us here in the desert. Same as what's happening at the polar ice caps, those tropical rainforests, savannas, tundras, and everything in between. All of that works together to affect what we experience here in Arizona. And ecosystems are very much a sum of a whole bunch of different parts, and each of those individual parts has a very important role to play. And the processes that occur within and between these parts is what provides us with the resources that we need to survive. And absolutely every aspect of our lives relies on these healthy, functioning ecosystems. Everything from food to water to clean air to the land on which we build our houses, the resources that we use to build them, places to learn, to relax, medicines, protection from natural disasters, absolutely everything relies on these healthy ecosystems. So when these systems begin to break down, it could take a while for us to realize the impacts of that, but over time we will see those impacts. So that's why it is so vitally important to maintain these healthy ecosystems, which also means maintaining those vital components within them. And one of those components is biodiversity. So biodiversity is basically the variety of life on Earth. And that is not just looking at species, but it's looking at everything from the genetic level all the way up to populations and beyond. And biodiversity is made up of a whole lot of things. I'm going to focus mostly on those individual species at this point. And so every individual species matters. And the best way that I have to describe this is by using this analogy of an airplane. So imagine that you were flying in an airplane 30,000 feet above sea level, and you glance out over the wing just in time to see one of those rivets that holds the airplane together pop out. Okay, single rivet, not a big cause for concern, okay. But when that rivet is lost, it puts just enough pressure on the rest of the system. All those other rivets around it that rely on its support now feel that pressure, and maybe we lose another one. And that increases the pressure in the system. And eventually we might start losing more and more rivets until finally, if we lose enough rivets, the system is going to collapse and the plane is going to crash. So unfortunately, that is very much what we are experiencing because biodiversity is declining, and it is declining at an alarming rate. We are experiencing an unprecedented and catastrophic loss of life. Thousands of species have already gone extinct. More than 1 million are currently threatened with extinction. And even though it's estimated that 86% of species in this world have yet to be discovered, it's also estimated that half of all species on the planet are going to be extinct by 2050. And that's only 32 years from now. So pictured here are some of the most endangered animals in the world, including the northern white rhino, which you see on the bottom. There are only 2 individuals of that species left in this world. They are both female. And so this species is essentially biologically extinct. So with that, as a wildlife biologist and also an avid reader, I wanted to share one of my favorite quotes with you. Wildlife conservation is always a race against time. As zoologists and botanists explore new areas, scrabbling to record the mere existence of species before they become extinct, it's like someone hurrying through a burning library, desperately trying to jot down some of the titles of books that will now never be read. So this isn't just a global issue, it's also a local issue. Here in Arizona, we have nearly 100 different species of plants and animals that are on the threatened and endangered list under the Endangered Species Act. But we can bring it down even further from that right here to the preserve. So presently, we do not have any species that we know of that are listed under the threatened, as threatened or endangered. But all of the species that you see here and many more are in decline, and these are species that live in the preserve. These are on sensitive lists or rare lists, and some of them, such as the Sonoran Desert Tortoise, are currently being reviewed, and they could be listed under the Endangered Species Act in the near future. So the causes for decline are vast. Most of them rely on us as humans. So as our population continues to grow, we continue to expand outward into natural areas. And as we do that, we are affecting these species, and we are greatly accelerating the rate at which we are losing them. And digging into the reasons for that, as I've mentioned before, habitat loss, degradation, and fragmentation is by far the biggest issue when it comes to species. Second to that, we have exploitation or overuse, so overhunting, collection, and other things. And then, as we've also discussed, non-native plants and animals, as well as climate change, are huge issues for all of these different species. All right, so there's the problem. What do we do about it? Well, we need to be able to monitor these systems, and we need to be able to monitor the health of these systems. So don't worry too much about this graphic on the right. This is just to show you the complexity of those systems, although really this is the simplest graphic that I could find out there. But in order to understand these ecosystems, we need to first know what's in them, and we need to understand the interactions and the processes that are occurring between these different components. From that, we can then quantify change that is happening within those systems, and we can determine the causes of that, whether they're environmental or anthropogenic causes. And the way that we do this is through long-term monitoring. The long-term monitoring is really the way that we are assessing health, because systems are not static. We can go out and we can do individual surveys, and those are excellent, but they're just a single snapshot in time. They aren't giving us an idea of what is actually going on within the system. And if they're not allowing us to tease out these changes that naturally occur or could be occurring due to anthropogenic causes. So for long-term monitoring, the bare minimum is 10 years, but honestly, a lot longer than that is preferred. So a good example of that is the Christmas bird count, which started in 1900, and it is an annual bird count, which means that this year, in just a couple of months, we will be conducting the 121st annual bird count. And this long-term data set is giving us amazing information about what is happening with birds in North America. But by conducting these long-term data sets, we can establish baseline data, and then we can determine the long-term trends and what changes are occurring within these systems. And by doing that, we can start to tease out why these changes are occurring. So many of them are going to be due to natural variation in the environment. So our weather, interannual variability, interseasonal variability, species interactions, and much more. But some of them are definitely going to be due to anthropogenic forces as well. So our development, transportation, recreation, and much more. And by teasing out what is actually influencing these changes, we can determine if we need to step in and what we need to do in order to protect these species and manage them into perpetuity. So now let's get down into the preserve. And I know that all of you know that the preserve is vitally important, but I'm going to explain why it's important from a biological viewpoint. So first of all, it's a protected landscape. And I think that we all know why that is so incredibly important to have these protected landscapes. Not only is it important for these species, but it's also important for us as scientists because this is the best possible place to conduct this long-term monitoring in these stable environments that have been protected. In addition to that, this is a very complex ecosystem. It has a huge diversity of habitats and different systems, macro and micro ecosystems occurring within it. And because of that, it's able to support a huge variety of species. We have identified more than 1,000 different types of plants and animals in the preserve. More than that, though, is its location in the region. So the preserve provides this vital connection for nearly 3 million acres of protected land. And this huge area of contiguous protected landscape is what allows so many of these species to survive here in the preserve and in the larger region. In addition to that, it's at the wildland-urban interface. So we have this amazing natural resource that is surrounded by urbanization. And this provides the ideal opportunity for us to investigate those natural influences versus those anthropogenic influences. And then finally, it's a heavily used area. So this gives us a great opportunity to investigate how that preserved status is working with the continued use of this area. And above and beyond that, because there is so much interest in the preserve through the visitors and through people who care about this place, we're able to engage them in this work and educate them about our precious Sonoran Desert. So from there, we can dive into the projects that we have. And I'm not going to spend too much time on these individual projects, but the goals of these is to look at those long-term trends. So ideally, we would be able to study absolutely everything in the preserve. I would love to do that, but it's not actually feasible to do. So instead, we need to select representative species or species groups to monitor. And these are the ones that we are currently monitoring. What's good about this is that many of these different species groups are indicators. So for example, amphibians are excellent indicators of pollution in the system. Birds are good indicators of habitat change, and butterflies are good indicators for climate change, as well as changes occurring within the environment overall. So for each of these different projects that we have rigorous established protocols that we use so that we're able to compare apples to apples through the entire duration of the project. We conduct regular monitoring because if we don't conduct regular monitoring and we don't detect the changes that are happening, we can't then respond in a timely fashion. And because it's important to account for that natural variation that's in the environment, we do this multiple times per year so that we can account for seasonal variation. And we also conduct these surveys at multiple sites throughout the preserve to account for variation in the habitat. So I'm not actually going to present any results at this point in time from these projects because most of these projects are still in their infancy and we're just starting to establish those baseline data sets. Even projects that have been going on for more than 5 years, such as our butterfly project, it's really difficult to determine trends at this point due to the high variability in our environment. So if you think about our precipitation patterns over the last couple of years, we know that butterflies are strongly influenced by precipitation, and we are just getting numbers all over the place so that we aren't yet able to detect those trends. But continued monitoring will eventually allow us to establish this baseline condition that we can detect those trends over time. But I am able to report that every single year through these surveys, we're able to detect new species in the preserve. So for example, just this year in 2020, even though there's been substantially reduced field work, we detected 5 new species in the preserve. Last year in 2019, we detected 25 new species in the preserve. So some of these are just passing through, migrating. Some have likely been here for a long amount of time and we're just now discovering them. And some of them, such as this little bugger down in the lower left, are invasive species. They're non-native, they don't belong here, introduced through a variety of means. And so it's important that we discover these and that we're able to continue monitoring to see if we need to take management action against them. So the last project I wanted to mention that fits in with this, we recently became a co-host organization for the Sonoran Desert Plant Species Specialist Group of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Say that one 10 times fast. But with this, we are determining the extinction risk of nearly 4,000 different native species of Sonoran Desert plants. So this is a global effort that we are involved in. But through determining this extinction risk, we are then able to guide management efforts so that we can actually hopefully conserve these species into perpetuity. So in each of these presentations, I have discussed the importance of working across boundaries, and there are no projects in which it is more important than in this sort of work. Because as far as we are aware, there are no species that occur solely within the preserve. But the preserve makes up a vital part of habitat for many of the species that are found throughout the region. So we need to understand what's happening with these species on a much broader scale beyond just the preserve. So because of that, we work closely with a variety of partners, but also our data feeds into these regional, national, and global data sets. And that helps us determine what's happening with these species across their ranges. But in turn, those regional, national, and global data sets help us understand what's happening here in the preserve. So to wrap up, just a quick summary of what it is that we're actually doing. The goal of these long-term monitoring projects, even though they take a lot of time, they do allow us to inform management. Because by monitoring what's in the system and understanding what's there, we're able to detect changes within those systems, determine the causes of those changes. We're able to determine if we need to step in order to manage them, in order to protect them. A good example of that is if we need to do anything with the trails to mitigate trails that are affecting species, or 128th Street, Rio Verde Drive. It's the long-term monitoring that enables us to determine what needs to be done with these concerns. And by protecting these species, we are protecting this vitally important area that we all love, and that nearly 1 million people from around the world come to visit every single year. But most importantly, by understanding what is happening with these components within the ecosystem, we're able to predict what could happen as our world continues to change. And with that, we're able to hopefully protect these species and these resources into perpetuity. And then finally, as always, education is such an important part of what we do. And all of our work feeds directly into the education efforts that we have so that we can help people understand the desert, understand their place in it, what they need to do in order to protect it. And by doing that, we are able to inspire people to become stewards of this land. All right, so where do we go from here? Well, hopefully we can just stare through binoculars and see amazing things, but that's not actually going to happen. We need to continue doing all of the projects that we are doing. Again, we're still establishing those baseline data sets, and the continued monitoring is really vital to make these data sets worthwhile. But we also need to do so much more. There are a number of other species and resources out there that we need to encapsulate and that we need to start studying. In addition to that, we need to start looking at all of the abiotic factors out there, such as surface water. So as with all of our other projects, we're making great strides here, but we are barely scratching the surface, and there's a lot more that can and should be done. And I look forward to discussing that with you in the future. With that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Great, Tiffany, thank you. As always, lots of very, very good information and some entertaining stuff as well. We'll open it up for a few brief questions or comments from any commissioners. Any commissioners with questions or comments on Tiffany's presentation?
This is Commissioner McKeegan. I have a comment and a question. First of all, Tiffany, obviously, thank you. I really appreciate the portion on the end where you talked about cooperation, because I think that's so important with issues as big as this. And since I've been on the commission, I've been a proponent of this type of work and of data, very supportive of things like the deer and the javelina counts, and obviously all the work you're doing at the Conservancy. I think it's the data we get on this is really important. The perhaps curveball question I have for you is, I totally get the long-term benefits and the need to have long-term studies, and that's where you see trends. What, if any, short-term benefits do we see from this? Are there examples or instances where you can identify something early that can allow us to get ahead of a potential issue?
Chairman Dodd, Commissioner McKeegan, thank you so much for that question. And yes, there are a number of short-term benefits that we can get out of this. One that I briefly touched on is the identification of new species. And this is especially important with species that are invasive or potentially harmful to the natural environment within there. So by knowing that those are present, we know to watch them, and we're able to then work on a management solution for the future. Beyond that, we are able to tease out some short-term benefits, some short-term gains there. For example, with the butterflies, that's one example that I gave where we're not able to really predict the trends at this time. But through this work, we have been able to identify that precipitation plays a huge role in what happens with these species. And I would love to in the future show you some of that data, because we go from record numbers of 2,200 individual butterflies one season, and then the very next season we get only 23 individuals, and that is in very large part due to the precipitation. Things such as those deer and javelina surveys, we can detect if there are declines in those species, drastic decline, and that can signal that we might need to be able to step in and do something more, whether that's more rigorous surveys or if it's something else. A good example of that, we have a project where we are doing emergence counts for bats that are using a mine in the preserve. And we have done year-long survey every month going out and doing these emergence counts. And at this point in time, we have a rough estimate of when bats are there. We know that it is a maternity colony, And knowing that is also very big because we know that this area is very sensitive and very important. So I'm rambling a little bit. I could go on, but please let me know if that helps answer your question or if you have additional.
No, I was just looking for some short-term optimism and you provided it. So thank you very much. And I'll leave you to the other commissioners.
Thank you.
Right. Commissioner Lips, your hand was up.
Yes. Hi, Tiffany. This was a great presentation. I just want to comment to think this all started with, well, you know, we kind of have to know what's in the preserve in order to protect it, which was about, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago that that subject came up. What's amazing with the presentation you just did to me was it kind of gave me a light bulb moment, you know, where, you know, we started off, you know, taking a look at all these different species and doing the phenology and the rest of it. And, you know, this is really the umbrella that ties it all together. So thanks so much for the evolution of all of this, because I know you've been a big part of that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. Any other commissioners with questions or comments?
Lori LaPat, I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Tiffany, as everyone said, nice presentation, really appreciate it. I was wondering, where do you recruit most of your team members to perform this study, and what kind of training do you give them in order to do this work?
Chairman Dodd, Commissioner, another excellent question. Luckily, recruitment is not difficult because when you talk about adorable animals, people are more than happy to jump on board. Even with our arthropod project, which most people don't think of arthropods as being cute and cuddly, people are really excited to get on board and do it. And that's actually one of the biggest drawbacks about this year is we've had to limit the participation due to COVID. So in terms of training, each different project has a different set of training that we do. Some of them have classroom training, such as the butterfly project. In normal years, we'll have a workshop where we discuss what butterflies are, their importance in the ecosystem, what we've been discovering through these surveys, and then get into the nitty-gritty of how to actually conduct the surveys. All of the projects, even those that don't have classroom training, do have field training. And so in general, people are paired with experts, such as our bird surveys and butterfly surveys. People are paired with experts who actually know how to identify all of these different things. And they receive training on what they need to do in order to make it a successful survey at that time. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other quick question or comment before we move on? Okay. Tiffany, once again, thanks for sharing what you do with us. It's all very, very helpful and educational. You make us smart.
Thank you very much.
Or at least more aware. So we will go from there to staff reports.
I'm going to start here as Scott brings up the screen, but we just have a couple quick updates. We already, one of the things we were going to talk about the working team. We already talked about the land acquisition. We'll also be pulling together the one that we talked about for access areas, and we'll be pulling those together during the month of November and getting them operational for December, January, so that we can bring information to the commission then in the new year. And then the other one that we talked about in the shaded amphitheaters, we did meet with our public information folks, and we are developing a virtual open house. It will probably come online. I'm going to put it end of the month, early December, and we'll be able to leave it up for a while. The nice thing, I've done these now for a couple park sites that we've been working on, and we, basically it is a guided PowerPoint or a narrated PowerPoint that we put up on the website, and people can see all the information. We'll probably have Phil Weddle, who's the architect involved, Scott, or maybe we were talking about Kelly possibly being one of our narrators. And that way the public can access at any time of day, and for a period of days or weeks. And so we'll get information on that. So we're going to be working on pulling that together. It's all based on information that you've already seen. And we just wanted you to be aware that those are some of the things that we're working on pulling together. So with that, Scott's going to run with the rest of the update.
I'll go through these pretty quickly, just some updates on things you've seen before. This was the Gateway parking lot where we replaced the eroding decomposed granite with the concrete. It's the concrete's in and the lines have been painted, the handicap symbols placed. So we're all wrapped up with that. Thank you everybody for your patience on that one. The ADA trail that accesses from the parking lot up to the building, we have been having erosion issues. You saw this picture before. There's what it looks like today. That is not going to erode. Our recycle enclosure, you've seen this picture before. It is now complete and ready to be the home of our very large recycle bins. So I know it's kind of a minor thing, but we're very excited about it. The parking lot surface at Lost Dog for the equestrian lot. This was the photo you saw last time of the removal. This was the installation process for the stabilized ABC, basically the gravel. Here's what part of it looks like afterwards. That white material that you see, that is the top coating of the glue, the liquid stabilizer. It's an organic glue product that holds that gravel together. The trail sign replacements, if you've been out in the Browns Ranch, Fracefield Granite area, it is well underway at this point, so we're excited about that. Quick update on Pima Dynamite. This was late last week. They were doing the one-time moves on the saguaros. So rather than moving the saguaros into a nursery and then digging them up again and putting them back in the ground, we worked really hard with the landscape architect and the contractor to move them one time from where they were to where they will ultimately rest in our landscaping. This is the water line being installed from Pima Road into the site. This is the old driveway that accessed the old rock yard. So we're underway with our utility installation. This is the excavation of the foundations of the footers for the restroom building at the trailhead. The rebar is going in for that. The gravel parking lot there at Pima Dynamite, this is the currently open to the public parking lot. I had shown you this photo before. Our field services crew from the city was in smoothing out parts of it to make it a little more parkable. They are now completed with the smoothing of the surface. This photo was just on Friday. We had quite a large group of equestrians come out. And our next step here is we're going to be putting down some white lines on top of the asphalt milling surface to give people a little more guidance as far as where to park. We're continuing to work on the trail alignments that will connect from the trailhead to the trails in the preserve, as well as the little circle here. That's the idea of the interpretive trail at Fountain Grass Hill. Side note, we are also beginning the process of the preserve staff and our architectural contractors for the trailhead working with the conservancy team of staff and stewards. We're very soon going to be kicking off the process of developing the theme and eventually the signage for the interpretive trail, as well as the signage that will be in and around the Pima Dynamite Trailhead building itself. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on those things.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? Okay, if not, we'll move on to item number 9.
Very quickly, this is our next meeting, November 19th. We'll do an overview of the overall policy process. We'll have Gina Kirkland with our Treasury staff speaking about funding options, kind of an update. We started that back in, I think, February, and then we got COVID delayed, so we'll be back on that. And then wildland fire preparation discussion on that. And then Tiffany will be joining us again for preserve habitat connectivity. And then we'll talk about the rest of the year or next year at next meeting. So I have nothing else, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Finally, any final commissioner questions, comments before we adjourn for the evening?
Steve, this is Vice Chair Wenstrom. I have a comment, a point of interest for our commissioners.
Sure.
Sure. I would like to do a shout out to our own Lori LaPat Palasco. She's the first vice president of Matrix New World Engineering when she doesn't volunteer with us. And she's been honored by the Society of Women Engineers Prism Award this year. And I think that's outstanding and really speaks to her value to us also as the McDowell Sonoran Preserve Commission. Congratulations, Lori.
Thank
Yes.
you very much. It's very, very kind of you.
Yes, congratulations from all of us. Okay, any other questions, comments before we go?
Yeah, just one comment from Commissioner Hackbarth.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
working with what's called the Historic Archaeology Advisory Commission. It's a state level organization. We're talking with the Preserve Sonoran Conservancy about how we can do a little more public outreach. And the first thing that we're talking about is the Browns Ranch Trail interpretive thing. So hope we'll bring something forward soon for that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn?
This is Commissioner McKeegan. I move to adjourn.
Okay, is there a second?
Sure, I second. LaPat Palasco seconds.
Okay, and we'll just do all in favor say aye.
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 Okay, I think we're done. Thank you all for coming and a good meeting, lots of good information. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.